Welcome back. Today we're tackling something that really keeps a lot of parents up at night. What happens when a school violence incident ends up on your child's permanent record? But is that mark really permanent? And could a powerful official, say a superintendent, just decide to make it all go away? Well, we're going to dig into that, using a real court case to see what the law actually says.
You see this quote? This really gets to the heart of what every parent hopes for in that kind of nightmare scenario. It's the hope that someone in charge can step in and grant a second chance. But it turns out, that very hope, well, it's what led to the huge legal battle we're about to unpack.
Okay, so to really get a feel for what's at stake here, let's talk about a real-world situation. Let's talk about Min-hee. She was a hardworking high school sophomore who, after one single mistake, found herself in front of the school violence committee.
Now, for Min-hee's mom, the community service, that wasn't the real punishment. The thing she was terrified of was the mandatory entry that was about to go on her daughter's permanent school record. With college applications just around the corner, this red line felt like it could just torpedo her daughter's entire future.
So, in the middle of all this panic, Min-hee's mom hears a rumor. A little glimmer of hope. She heard that some local education superintendents were telling schools to hold off on recording these kinds of incidents. And this wasn't just gossip, It was actually the start of a major legal showdown over who really has the final say on a student's future.
So here's how the battle lines were drawn. On one side, you've got the Minister of Education, representing the central government. Their directive was simple and strict. For the whole country, record all school violence measures immediately, period. It was all about a zero-tolerance policy. But then, on the other side, some local superintendents pushed back. They argued that branding students with what's essentially a permanent scarlet letter was just way too harsh.
Well, as you can imagine, this argument went straight to the top. Lawsuits were filed, and it landed right in front of the Supreme Court. And it all came down to this one really fundamental question. Is handling school records a local thing where a superintendent can make their own call? Or is it a national matter where one rule has to apply to everybody, everywhere?
So, this fight, it goes all the way up the ladder. The Supreme Court agrees to hear the case, and everybody knew whatever they decided was going to become the unbreakable rule for every single student, parent, and school administrator across the entire country. And the court's decision? It was crystal clear. They sided with the Minister of Education, full stop. The final word was that local superintendents and principals simply do not have the authority to refuse to record these incidents. They have to follow the national directive.
So how did they get there? The legal reasoning really hinges on this idea called agency-delegated state affairs. What that means, in plain English, is that the court said managing student records isn't just a local job. It's a national responsibility that's just been handed off to local authorities to carry out. This is all to make sure that the system is fair for every student, no matter where they live, especially for something as important as getting into college.
Okay, and this is where it gets kind of fun. There's a simple analogy that makes this whole legal thing make perfect sense. Picture the entire school system as one huge national hamburger chain.
The head office, that's our central government. They create one single official recipe for the burgers. Let's say all patties must be cooked for exactly 3 minutes. Why? Because consistency is everything for the brand's reputation. They want a customer in one city to get the exact same burger as a customer 1,000 miles away.
And this, right here, is a brilliant way to understand the court's logic. The local branch manager, who is our superintendent in this story, they can't just decide to go rogue and change the recipe. They can't say, hey, my customers here, they like their burgers a little rarer, so I'm only cooking them for 1 minute. Nope, that is not their call to make. They're there to execute the head office's plan.
And the reason why is pretty obvious when you think about it. If every single branch started making their own version of the burger, it would completely destroy the brand's reputation and credibility. And in exactly the same way, if every school district made up its own rules for student records, it would totally undermine public trust in the fairness of the whole university admissions system.
Okay, so the Supreme Court has laid down the law. You can't just cross your fingers and hope your local superintendent will bend the rules for you. The system is fixed. So, if that's the reality, what can a parent actually do? Let's get into the practical, strategic moves you can actually make.
Look, the biggest takeaway here is that just appealing to emotion, it's not going to get you anywhere. You have to be strategic. The path forward is a legal one. All right, first up, the committee meeting itself. Your goal is to argue the facts and aim for a no-action decision or, at worst, a very minor penalty. If that doesn't work, step 2 is filing an administrative appeal. And this part is absolutely critical. You also file for what's called an injunction to stop the record from being entered while your appeal is being heard. Step 3, your last resort, is an actual lawsuit. And finally, Step 4, even if a record is made, there's still a chance. Before graduation, you can petition a review board to have it deleted, but you have to show proof of real remorse and positive change in the student. So at the end of the day, this big Supreme Court case teaches us all a really powerful lesson. When your kid's future is on the line, it's easy to feel like you're fighting a specific person, but you're not. You're navigating a system. And just hoping for an exception to be made for you, that's not a strategy. The real question becomes, not are the rules fair, but do I have the right strategy to work within these rules? Because that is your most powerful tool.